Hey everybody, it's Matt here, and it's day 2 of Greg's Garage 30-day challenge. It's Tuesday the 2nd of August, and I haven't been able to get out here to the shop till now, which is 10:30 PM, so we're not going to get much done tonight, which is fine. So rather than stripping more on this lathe, I might just do a quick video on some of the tools and techniques I'll be using to get rid of some of the paint and the mess on the parts on this lathe. So let's check out what I've got here. Okay, so once I get this lathe to pieces, the next step will be getting off all the layers of paint, and as you can see on the top of this cross slide, I can see the grey that we put on when we did a quick resto. I can see green and grey and a dark grey. I'm not sure whether back to bare metal or not here, but there's a couple of different layers of paint on there, and I'm going to treat this like I would a motorcycle part or a car part, and try and give it, I wouldn't say show car finish, but as good as I can do in my own shop. So that means surface prep, and my experience would suggest that if I don't go back to bare metal and do the prep from there, then I'm probably going to have a second-rate finish. So normally what I'll be aiming to do is go back to bare metal and then start priming and filling and painting after that. So let's talk about how to get the paint off. Now, of course, you can use a chemical stripper. I just think they're really messy, and the residue and the mess that's left behind, you've got to dispose of it, some way. It's normally pretty nasty on your skin. So while I'm not totally adverse to it, I just think it's messy, and I think I can get a quicker and maybe better result with this sort of system here. So if you've seen my video on polishing, which I'll put a link up here, it really starts from a part that is perhaps in this sort of condition. So clean, smooth, and just needs to be polished up. So we'll do that on all these handles and dials and everything later on. But when you're starting with a part that's painted, you've got to go back to bare metal. So my two favourite accessories for doing that are these two. So 4-inch angle grinders, and I've got 3 or 4 of these, and whenever they're on special, like for $50 I'll buy a decent name brand. These are Milwaukee ones, and I think I bought these for $55 when they're on special, and they're pretty bulletproof. This old Makita I've had since the mid-90s, and the bearings are noisy, but it never dies, so it just keeps on going. So you can just use one grinder, but then you spend a bit of time changing accessories, and I'm lazy, and it's worth spending the money on the grinders so that you can have these set up and just plug them in and use them whenever you need them. Anyway, that's my opinion. So getting paint off, if you've got a nice big flat surface like this cover, which is the cover for the change gears on the lathe, the fastest way to get all the paint off, in my opinion, mechanically, is what we call, here in Australia, it's a strip it disc. I think it might be called a strip and clean disc in other places, but it looks like, I don't know, coral or something. It's quite hard and rigid, and you just put this on the grinder, spin it onto the grinder. There's a nut on the back of it, and that does a fantastic job of taking paint off. And I've cleaned 2 or 3 layers of paint off a motorcycle tank in about 20 minutes with one of these. So they're not cheap. They're about, here in Australia, these are about $20. But for the speed and the quality of the finish, to me, it's worth the money. So flat surfaces, no problem. And that's because this is generally rigid, so it won't go into these sort of nooks and crannies. These are great just for flat surfaces. For these sort of nooks and crannies and shapes that might be a bit irregular, like this, wire wheel on an angle grinder does a great job as well. So you can get a flat one like this, or I think they call this a cup wheel. They both do the same thing, just different shapes, and sometimes the orientation of one works better than the other, depending on what you're trying to get into. And these will just take the paint off, and they generally won't damage the surface. Now, that is obviously based on it being steel, so these wheels have got steel wire. So if you're using them on something softer than steel, like aluminium or brass or something, you're going to damage that surface. But on a hard surface like steel, you should just be taking the paint off and actually doing a really good job of getting all the rust off and anything else that's on there. So these are great. They're pretty cheap, you know, $10 each for a wheel, and they last for ages, for years really. So that's the first step, is to get it back to bare metal. Now, yeah, you say, oh, but what about a flap wheel or an abrasive wheel, sanding wheel on a grinder? Well, these are great too, but these don't discriminate between paint and metal, so they'll take the metal off just as well as they take the paint off. And I don't want to do that. I just want to take the paint off. If I'm sanding welds down or something similar, then yeah, I need one of these, but not if I'm stripping paint. So don't use a flap wheel. So wire wheel, stripper disc are the two suggested ways to do it. Now, once you've started to get the paint off, and you want to smooth the surface and get it ready for paint, you need to smooth it off a bit further. So the other accessories that I've found are really helpful on steel are these, we call them here, they're poly flap discs. So they're like the Scotch-Brite type material and constructed like a flap wheel, and you just use them like a flap wheel. So you just basically use them like a standing pad. And these ones are in a couple of different grades. The red ones are medium and the blue ones are fine. So I might use the wire wheel first, then the medium, and then the fine, and that'll give me a pretty good finish. And I'll demonstrate that on the weekend when I can use power tools out here without pissing off my neighbours excessively. So 4-inch angle grinder, works great. They're cheap. The grinders are cheap. The accessories are relatively cheap, and you can get a really good finish. So that's what I'll be using to remove the majority of the paint. I will do a demo with some paint stripper anyway on the weekend, just for shits and giggles. But I'll do the majority of the work with these because I think I'll strip most of the paint on these parts, you know, in a couple of hours. So that'll be it for today. This will also give me a chance to make sure I've got enough of these things either here, and if I don't, then I've got time to get to the store before the weekend. So I'll probably just spend Saturday stripping paint. So the rest of this week I'll be finishing off the stripping of the lathe, and then we'll be ready to start cleaning and stripping paint off. So thanks for watching. Any questions, please put something in the comments below, and we can definitely get some more information if you're after it. So thanks again, cheers, and see you tomorrow.